Biden now going to allow Ukrainian forces to use long-range U.S. weapons inside of Russia for the very first time.
Russia will also consider the possibility of using nuclear weapons when receiving reliable information about a massive launch of means of aerospace attack and their crossing of our state border.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today.
So over the weekend, our brain-dead president escalated tensions with Russia, bringing us ever closer to World War III. So if you ever wondered what dangerous, pure incompetence looks like, well, here it is right here. Joe Biden authorized Ukraine to start sending U.S.-provided long-range missiles into Russia to attack military bases, logistical supply lines, things like that, to make it more difficult for Russians to supply their frontline troops in Ukraine. And for some reason, I just can't actually believe that the doddering old man Joe Biden authorized this himself. Because over the weekend, he was in Brazil in the Amazon rainforest, giving a press conference, doing a little publicity stunt about climate change. And he cluelessly walks off after his press conference, essentially just into the forest. And you can't tell me that this guy authorized Ukraine to use long-range missiles into Russia. Or maybe he did and just has no idea what he's doing. But take a look at Joe Biden wandering into the wilderness after a press conference. Watch.
Forever, for the benefit of all humanity. Thank you very, very much.
Mr. President, why have you decided to prove Ukraine peace as long?
This is what senility looks like. This is the move that he does when he's giving a press conference anywhere else where there's usually an exit stage right or exit stage left for him. But he just turns around and just walks into the wilderness. Like, this is legitimately our president. And you can see clearly why this person wasn't able to deter a Russian invasion or deter Iran from its proxy wars against Israel or deter China from wanting to take Taiwan. This man is completely clueless. So the problem with authorizing Ukraine to use these long-range missiles is, number one, it's dangerous and it escalates us closer to a global conflict. But number two, it's the timing in which this is done. If this would have been authorized right after the war started, it would have been a dangerous escalation, but it would have made more sense because it would have actually shown that the U.S. was trying to allow Ukraine to win the war. But because it's happening now, it just essentially looks like one last cash grab for the military-industrial complex right before Trump comes in, settles all the wars, and institutes world peace. I mean, it just clearly looks like the United States has just been pussyfooting around the past 2.5 years with this war, trying to make it so no side is anywhere closer to winning, and that the United States has to keep funneling billions and billions and billions of dollars into Ukraine to maintain this weird kind of stalemate with no end goal in sight. But now that it's only a few short months before Trump is in office and plans to end these wars, it looks like the Democratic establishment, in conjunction with the military-industrial complex, is trying to escalate this conflict beyond repair and just make things even more difficult for Trump when he gets in office trying to resolve this. But here's Russian President Vladimir Putin reacting to the news that Biden has authorized Ukraine to use these long-term missiles, saying that he will see this as a joint attack on Russia by the United States and NATO and will not hesitate to use nuclear weapons if Russia is attacked. Watch.
In the updated version of the document, aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, but with the support of a nuclear state, is proposed to be considered as their joint attack on Russia. Russia will also consider the possibility of using nuclear weapons when receiving reliable information about a massive launch of means of aerospace attack and their crossing of our state border. This includes strategic and tactical aircraft, as well as cruise missiles and drones, hypersonic and other delivery vehicles. Russia reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in case of aggression, including if the enemy using conventional weapons poses a critical threat.
Now, there's a lot of questions about Russia's nuclear arsenal, its capability, and if these missiles are even effective or functional. But even if a large percentage of their arsenal isn't functional and outdated, they still have enough nuclear weapons to cause some serious damage and probably destroy the world a few times over. And while dictators like Putin in North Korea often threaten using nuclear weapons, this particular threat seems a little bit more credible because of how Russia has been performing in Ukraine. Russia has lost over 500,000 soldiers. They're losing thousands of soldiers a day. They've brought North Korean troops onto the front line to help fight the conflict. And Putin is losing a lot of support internally in Russia for the humiliation of not being able to conquer and win this war in Ukraine. And the ultimate threat to Putin's power will be if Ukraine actually starts making some serious advancements in the war, and Putin's sacrifice of his people will be all for nothing. He will certainly get ousted as president. There will be a lot of political revolution going on in Russia. And that is the number one thing that Putin does not want. So if these long-range missiles are actually going to help Ukraine make some serious advancement in this war, I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that Putin might just be serious this time about using nuclear weapons. And obviously, if he uses nuclear weapons, NATO and the US have to jump in, which means it is a full-blown world war at that point. It's almost close to being a world war as we speak, because North Korea sent 10,000 troops to the front line of Russia, and South Korea is considering jumping in on the Ukrainian side because Russia's promising North Korea technology to help its nuclear ballistic missiles, which is a direct threat to South Korea. And so if North Korean troops die because of these Ukrainian blasts, there's a very real possibility that North Korea starts a conflict with South Korea. Or if South Korean and North Korean troops meet on the front lines in Ukraine, there's a very real possibility that North Korea sees that as a resummation of the war that has been a stalemate in the Korean Peninsula. And I just can't see why the Democratic Party would allow such an escalation to occur months before Trump, who has been saying consistently that he is going to end this war, comes into office. But if you want to see a perfect example of a military-industrial complex shill, watch John Bolton on CNN saying how Putin's declaration that they'll use nuclear weapons is actually insignificant. Shouldn't be worried. Watch.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has previously warned that allowing Ukraine to use these long-range weapons inside Russia would mean the NATO allies are directly at war with Russia, and that, quote, appropriate decisions would be made to those threats. We just heard Fred Pleitgen's reporting there about how they've changed the wording around their nuclear rules. Are you concerned about that piece of it?
No, there are two aspects to this. Number one, this threat of a wider war. That's the phrase we've heard day after day after day in the last 2.5 years from the Biden administration. Could be conventional, could be nuclear. If it's a conventional threat, where's the Russian army that's going to provoke this wider war? And by the way, if it's so good and so extensive, why isn't it fighting in Ukraine in the first place, given the miserable performance of Russian combat arms so far? And as to the nuclear threat, look, that change in Russian doctrine was insignificant.
And this is the problem with these people. They aren't the ones fighting the conflict. Them and their friends are lining their pockets because of all the weapons and arms sales. And to not take Putin's threat as credible shows a severe lack of seriousness. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can't just roll over to every bluff that these crazy dictators make. But to consider his threat insignificant when looking at all the factors I just talked about earlier, a desperate person with a nuclear arsenal is not to be taken lightly. That's why a peace through strength agenda was so effective, because you never want to push these people to the point to where they feel like using nuclear weapons is their only means of self-preservation. Again, Russia has lost 500 or 600,000 troops in this war with absolutely nothing to show for it. So if they start to actually lose the war based off of Ukraine attacking their sites in Russia, the population of Russia is going to be furious that so many people were sent to slaughter for absolutely no reason, and that is a direct threat to Putin's power. The circumstances are not the same as usual, and so I think this threat should be taken extremely, extremely seriously. Here's what Donald Trump had to say about ending this war in Russia before it turns into World War III. Watch.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership. Every day this proxy battle in Ukraine continues, we risk global war. We must be absolutely clear that our objective is to immediately have a total cessation of hostilities. All shooting has to stop. This is the central issue. We need peace without delay.
I can't bring myself to believe that the same guy who strolls into the wilderness without a clue of what's going on is the same person who is taking a look at the chessboard and making strategic moves. The Democratic establishment, these war hawks, the military-industrial complex, they've gotten so used to U.S. military supremacy and global dominance that I think they've just taken the possibility of a serious global war off the table because they see funding all these different wars as just a cash grab, as just a way to enrich their cronies, but they're not realizing that eventually one of these irrational players is going to escalate things to a point to where it becomes very, very serious. Let me know what you guys think about this wild escalation down in the comments section below. Make sure you guys hit the like button on this video if you haven't already. I know this is a little bit different than liberals getting owned, but I wanted to make sure you guys are well informed with what's going on in the world today. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and turn on the notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.